Not bad.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jenny. Welcome to Miami Lit Podcast. Today I'm joined by Jean, and we have a super exciting episode for you. We're totally going to geek out on one of my favorite novels, and hopefully it'll become one of yours too. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, which we have right here. So let's just dive in. Um, I've read this a couple times. Jean, I know you've read it one time. So we may have, let's compare our reactions. What did you think about reading this book?
I mean, just to be completely honest, and you know this, I only read half of it so far. I mean,
Okay,
so it's
yeah.
I'm still getting through
Let's
it.
be transparent.
Yeah, of course. But definitely, it's the most fun I've had reading in a really, really long time.
Right.
Usually, reading for me now is like work, so
Yes.
I have to get through it. But this was just a breeze, and it struck me as something extremely relevant for our times right now because of how we talked about before we started. Is you picked the perfect word. It's very prophetic.
Yes, it definitely has that feel. And I mean, for me, I read it as a teenager and it was extremely bizarre. My first reaction was like, what is this thing? And then as an adult, and I had the privilege of teaching it a couple of years, and that was a whole different experience, which was super exciting. And what I loved about this one, and when we look at the dystopian genre, is you usually pick up the book and you know right off the bat it's going to be weird and you're going to feel uncomfortable because it's a dystopia. But with Brave New World, you pick up the book and you start, and everything just feels so happy and perfect, and you kind of want to be a part of it. But then, as you get into it, he has a great skill in getting the reader through certain components that make you feel completely uncomfortable, and you start going like, wait a minute, this sucks. I don't want to be a part of this anymore. And I think that's what makes this one a little bit special.
Yeah. No, and he's very good at sort of layering it because I think he's very good at it's labeled as dystopian,
Right.
but he presents it as a utopia.
Yes.
So he like flips the table as you're reading it. But the very first scenes actually I feel like they're supposed to make you uncomfortable because he's describing the very first thing that he's describing is how everybody in this society is born.
Yeah.
So, and everybody is born in a factory.
Yes.
So it's almost like it is actually a production line of human beings. So human beings aren't born anymore through regular sex.
Right. Our biology is no longer necessary for us to exist in this world.
Yeah. And he goes into such detail describing, um, how many babies can be born from certain amount of ovaries, and so it's like a product line of how fetuses being incubated and being born into actual babies, and then
Right.
as the babies are growing up into their childhood, they're being indoctrinated, and you're walking through this. It's like you're walking through the director of the production line, guiding these students, and it's like they're taking a tour of the factory where human beings are made,
Right.
and that just makes me feel really, really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And at first, I was like, "Whoa, okay, so this is nuts. This is crazy, right?" But it's prophetic in a way because it's happening right now.
Yeah.
And he wrote this in 1924, I think.
Yes.
And it's like he saw this coming, and we have the technology now, right? The eugenics. We have the technology right now um, to I forgot what it's called when you what is it called? I'm sorry. It's when a woman can't get pregnant, so they have
Infertility?
yeah, when a
Yeah.
woman has infertility issues, and
Right.
so they they're able to get
Yeah, we have ways of helping people in those situations now that we didn't when he was writing this book.
yeah, so it's like he saw that coming, and it's like all right, we have the technology to do that right now. And even further than that, we have all these CRISPR technologies where we can actually manipulate the DNA in fetuses,
Yeah.
and we can sort of pick and choose what the flaws are, and or at least what the advantages are going to be. So if you have a sort of well, if you have like like through a family line, you have like a genetic issue,
Right.
right? So let's say
Yeah, like diabetes, sorry, or some sort of generational disease, maybe. Yeah.
yeah, and then you can just get rid of that, right?
Right.
Do you want your kid to be blonde, or do you want them to be brunette? Do you want your kid to be tall? Do you want them to be medium
Right.
size? And we have the technology now
Yeah, we
to.
can even pick, do you want to have a boy or a girl? Um, and how much of that should we be able to choose? It's a big question.
Yeah, and it's like, how much are we? How much should we interfere with the natural process of breeding,
Right.
keeping the species going? The common term is, at least critics of eugenics say that we're playing God,
Yeah.
right? And then sort of proponents of eugenics are saying, well, if God was playing God, then we wouldn't have to. So there's this clash right now, this ethical clash in biology, with that it's sort of not really in the spotlight right now. It's sort of like they're in their own little world
Yeah.
while all of these things are happening. And what troubles me is that, all right, it's like is advancing faster than our ethics of the technology is. So it makes me think of like, all right, well, what are the possible outcomes of it? And so this is definitely an outcome of it.
Right.
So reading it, I felt really, really uncomfortable. But then, what is the outcome of it? And like how you were saying, it's a perfect world. Like, what do you remember like as this utopian world that he
Well,
presents?
it just, the way he presents it, everyone's happy. Really, really happy, right? Like scarily happy. And there's no room for heartbreak, pain, just, war, famine, bad things happening to you that we all deal with on a daily basis all over the world, right?
Yeah.
There are so many people suffering right now. This world has been able to eradicate all of that and just leave this exhilarating happiness, which is like, okay, well, that's great. But then you start to realize that everything has a cost, including happiness, right? Nothing is free. We even have to pay for our happiness. And that's a payment that we each bargain with ourselves on what that should be. But in this case, it just seems like the price is really, really high because you've gotten rid of all individuality, all structure. That was my big uncomfortable moment with the book.
Like, what do you mean by loss of like structure, though?
Just natural structure. You know what I mean? How in a natural, regular world, you have people that just come up in the ranks. Some people are better at some things than others. And we kind of all fall into this line in a way that makes us grow. For example, since we're talking about teaching, and when you're in college and you want to pick a class, do you just choose whatever professor? Assumingly, they're all great, but most of us would kind of pick and ask, hey, who's better at, this subject? Who's in this class? You'll go to rate my professor and find who has the best ratings because we want the best of the best. And that's what I mean by structure, like hierarchies, and how it doesn't exist here in order to give rise to this happiness. But what's the cost?
Yeah, like hierarchies are definitely gone, but there is a caste system that's
Yeah.
presented in the book. And what's really interesting is the way that Huxley sort of makes them opposing viewpoints, because when you think of a caste system, you would think of a hierarchy, but a hierarchy, I guess in its very nature, allows for some sort of motility, right? So in a hierarchy, depending on what that hierarchy is, right? So
Right.
if it's a hierarchy of, let's say, competence, right? So it's like the best of a certain thing are at the top, right? And then the worst are in the bottom, right?
Right.
You can be the worst at something and then work your way up to the top. You
Exactly.
can be at the
You're
top.
not locked in, which is the beauty of it. We can kind of, pick and choose where we want to fall. And if we're comfortable in that place, we stay. And if not, we can move.
Yeah. And that doesn't exist in that world.
No.
And their placement in the caste system is, at birth, and it's decided at birth. And it's decided, the categories that he picks, right? They're the alpha, beta, gamma, delta, and
Right.
epsilon, right?
Yeah.
So it's like the alphas, and they even have subcategories, right? So there's alpha plus and alpha minus, right?
Right.
And then beta plus, beta minus. So they have even subcategories.
Yeah, because I think it's really interesting that he made it so specific, because I think for us as humans who are individuals but at the same time need each other, and we have that juxtaposition, it's really important for us to have some sort of structure. It's how we all benefit, through structure.
Because I wanted to ask you this because we were talking about it a little bit before we were recording. Do you think that this whole idea of alpha, beta, these categories that he presents here and that we talk about on a normal basis, do you think that's real? Or do you think
I
that's real?
do. Yes, I do.
Yeah, because I only ask because there is a viewpoint
Yeah.
that disagrees, that says that there are no alphas, there are no betas, at least in the human world, right? In the animal kingdom, they say that they do.
Right.
And then in the human world, they say like, no, those categories don't really exist.
I do, especially because in any setting, if you're in a classroom as a teacher, you can quickly pick out who the leader is. And, in a work environment, you can pick out who's like the go-getter. So I think naturally we do fall under those categories, and people who don't want to be leaders will seek out someone to lead them. I think it's just part of our nature.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And it brings a comfort to know that if I don't want to step into a certain role, I have somebody that will guide me, right? That's why we have mentors and people in certain moments in our lives that will hold our hand through situations. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's just part of our nature, who we are.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
Yeah.
And I definitely think that there is like how you said, you can go into a room and you can tell, right?
Yeah.
You can't really fake confidence, right?
No.
So it's like, what do you think of like the typical alpha male, right? It's
I think it's great.
It's you think of like the masculine, confident, efficient, competent male, right? That they're good at what they do and they take pride in what they do. They take care of themselves, they take care of the world around them.
Right.
They're an active force in the
Yeah.
world, right? And then like you think of like a beta male, right? A beta male you would think of as, all right, and it's interesting because there's different ideas of if there's more than just alphas and betas, right? Because there's some viewpoints that are like, no, there's just alphas and they're just betas, right?
Right.
And then betas are like more feminine males, reactive to the world, right? They don't really contribute, right? They just sort of they just react to whatever is happening.
They don't really take control.
Yeah. And then, but there are other viewpoints that agree with Huxley that there are more categories than that, right? So a lot of some viewpoints go all the way up to epsilon or they go up to delta, right?
Right.
And the deltas and epsilons are usually just like the foot workers, right?
Yeah.
I think of like worker ants or
Yeah.
something like that, right? They're just part of the production line, right? Which is a huge theme in the book, right?
Yes.
So there's the production line of society, right? And they're not really the leaders. They're not really the geniuses behind what's actually happening in the world. And it's like, well, the reason why it's relevant is because it's like, well, where do you fit within
Right.
that? I want to call it a hierarchy, right?
Yeah.
But Huxley flips it on us, like he makes it like a caste, because in a way, I sort of think that you don't really have a choice in that matter.
Okay.
I
So
s-
you don't think that you can move?
I think it's possible, but I think it's very, very hard because
I agree with that.
like I think that it's like I think that there is an aspect to you being born into some sort of
I think it would take tremendous self-awareness and understanding of who you are and how you work as a person and who you want to be and making that pathway
yeah.
for yourself.
It's an extreme spiritual growth.
For
If
sure.
you want to, and then I don't imagine someone who's an alpha wanting to go and become
No.
a delta or something like that.
I think that would be a disservice
Exactly.
to yourself and to those around you.
And it kind of goes against the idea of being an alpha anyways.
Excuse
right?
me, yeah.
It goes against like, all right, like, well, an alpha is by its nature is, male or female.
Right, a
is-
leader.
Yeah, a leader.
Within their context, which is why I think it's so interesting that he stripped so much of what makes us human in the novel, and he decided to leave that in.
And the fact that the main character is an alpha but flawed.
Yeah.
So the theory in the book is that part of when he was in the factory during the eugenics section, they accidentally put a little too much alcohol into the chemistry so that he was.
Isn't that what messes up a lot of us?
Yeah,
Alcohol, right?
Yeah, no, it's genius.
Yeah,
and he doesn't. It's not subtle at all, right? And then drinking and smoking a pregnant woman using drugs during pregnancy is obviously has detrimental effects
Right.
to the baby once it's born, right? And so he doesn't hide that, and it's very, very obvious. So the main character, which I think is brilliant, his name is Bernard Marx. So I love that he doesn't hide it. Marx, of course.
Yeah.
So Bernard Marx, what is it? He's an alpha, so he's assigned he's been assigned at birth to be an alpha,
Yeah.
but he is shorter than the average alpha, and
He made it by
he made
a
it.
very small margin. He should not have been there.
Yeah, no, he should not have been there, and he has an inferiority complex.
Yes.
So it's like, are you really an alpha then? Right? Because it's like he's like a fish out of water in his own light, and then his best friend is physically like what you could consider to be an alpha, but mentally, he doesn't feel like he fits in because he thinks he's too smart for everybody else.
Right.
And so it's like, all right, where do you belong in this, right? And I think that it's something that we do, if we're gonna take a lesson from it. I think it's something that we do have to figure out for ourselves, right? Like, where do you fit in?
Right.
Have you ever heard of the Omega male?
No.
So
Tell me about that.
the Omega male is and it's Omega female as well.
Okay.
They are the people that don't care about any of their role in society, and they go their own way.
But what does that mean?
So
They go their own way.
So it's kind of like, have you ever met someone who is kind of like, they don't really care about competition. They don't really care about if they're achieving or not, but they do.
Oh.
But they do stick to their morals in a very strong way. They're very, very interesting people. They're very they.
Because I feel I don't really care about competition. I've never been competitive, but I am competitive with myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like I set a certain bar, certain standard for myself, and if I don't meet it or surpass it, it becomes a problem. So maybe I am competitive. I just realized.
Yeah. No. Yeah. You definitely are.
But I've never seen myself that way.
That's the thing, and human beings. We're so bad at looking at ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And like, it reminds me of The Office when.
Oh my God.
When
Best show ever.
Yeah, it's genius when they bring in the really handsome salesman that
Yeah.
and then he's just like, oh, doesn't he remind you of someone? And he thinks that that's what he looks like. And then,
Wait, so I have a question for you.
yeah,
Am I the world's best boss?
are you the world's best boss?
Yeah.
You're all right.
Okay.
Yeah, you're there.
Did you get the reference?
Huh? Yeah, the mug.
The mug,
right?
okay,
Yeah, the mug, yeah. But it's like, you're all right. You're all right, Jenny.
Okay, I'll take it.
You treat me well.
I'll take it.
But yeah, it's like, well, where do you fit in this world? And it's like, back to like what I was talking about before. I feel like I think that there is some truth to that, what the book is talking about, that we don't really have a choice in that matter
Right.
for the most part, right? So it's very hard to see like a tall, handsome, or beautiful person with that's confidence and intelligence
Right.
and is active. It's sort of hard to see them going like changing in any other way.
Yeah.
And it's also very hard to see someone who isn't competitive, isn't doesn't want more out of life, right? It's very hard to see them in leadership roles.
Yeah.
It's like they're people that you shouldn't trust in a leadership role.
Absolutely. I think that's, it all comes down to human nature and acknowledging the fact that each person within themselves is an entire universe. Because when you try to understand or draft these societies and make it these very, scientific, it becomes an issue because everyone, as much as we can try to categorize and be right on the money, there's always that small factor that we're each such a world within ourselves that it's extremely difficult to just fit in a box.
Yeah. No, and that's exactly what people who are against that categorization idea, that's exactly what they say.
Right.
Because an argument against what we're talking about is that, well, you can be, for example, you can be an alpha in a certain environment, right? But then you put them in a different environment and then you see them as like a
They
beta.
take a different role. Yeah.
Exactly. And
Because
so
we're complex beings. It's not so simple. But that same token, I do think these categories are very much real, and they do play a part in everything that we do. Whether we want to label them or not, they're still there.
yeah.
Yeah.
And just like, in the book, it's extremely important where they are. And from birth, well, even before birth, they, kind of like that fad that of pregnant women playing Mozart to the fetuses.
Oh, yeah.
To make them smarter. They do that in the book. And
Yeah.
then in the factories where the children are sleeping, they have them listening to certain recordings in their sleep. And then they're saying, well, I'm so happy to be a beta because I don't have to work as hard as an alpha.
Right.
But I'm also better than a delta. So it's like, and then like, it's like, I'm so happy to be a delta because.
Yeah, there's this extreme emphasis on happiness,
Yes.
which, I mean, isn't that what we're all after? Just, happiness. But the way it's so emphasized here, it makes it almost creepy. Like, maybe I don't want it anymore. You know what I mean? Just because that's your sole purpose is to just be happy all the time at whatever cost. And that, I think, it becomes an issue because there are so many other emotions that you're negating.
Yeah. I don't think Huxley had this in mind, but this is a very, very good contrast to Aristotle. Because
Right.
though Aristotle said that the purpose of being alive is to be happy, in the Greek, it's the eudaimonia, which isn't like a feeling of happiness, which is the corruption that Huxley is talking about.
Right.
It's like they drink soma, I think it's called. It's like
Yes.
a drug that
Yeah.
it's like, all right, now I feel happy. So it's like it's a corruption of Aristotle, because Aristotle says it's not, happiness isn't like a state that you're like feeling, it's a way of life.
Right.
So it's like you have your ups and downs, but as long as you're fulfilling your purpose, then you will be a happy human being. But
Right.
part of fulfilling your purpose is understanding his hylomorphism, is your form and matter, right? So it's like, I cannot be a linebacker for the Packers, right? Because I don't have the form or the matter to do that, right? So it's like, maybe if I was, you can't be Rudy, right? I can't
Right.
be Rudy because then I'll never be happy, right?
Yeah, you have to have a certain acceptance within your reality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I think Huxley calls us to, in an Aristotelian way, call us to figure out where we fit in our own environment and try to be the best that we can in it.
Right.
But the argument is, it's like, should that be forced on us or not?
Right. Exactly. Well, another part of the book that we we definitely want to discuss is the Reconstruction of History, and how that plays a big part in creating this world where everyone's perfect and so happy, right? They've completely gotten rid of history and the way that it would have been, which is obviously problematic. But everything with history is kind of problematic because it's perception, right? So it brings into question how much of our history is real and is not, and is manipulated, and all of that. So I think we should discuss that a little bit.
Yeah, because our connection with history, I think, is extremely important, because it's where we come from.
Right.
And I think that naturally we have this desire to understand where we're from because it helps us figure out who we are right now
Right.
and where we're going, right? But if it's so fragile that it can be manipulated so easily, because in the book, they get rid of all of human history. They have all these examples. There's no such thing as Mozart. There's no such thing as
Well, Shakespeare is banned
yeah.
in the book, which is just a crime. Yeah. And it just, like, why would you ban Shakespeare? Shakespeare, it's one of the most important records of our history. So it makes sense for Shakespeare to be banned. But
Because Shakespeare is what Shakespeare's really good at is sort of drilling into us that drive for action.
Right.
And depending on the play, right? So it's my favorite is Hamlet, right? So
yeah.
Hamlet is about overcoming your own internal your own internal demons, right? It doesn't matter if the ghost was real or not, right? What matters is that he saw it.
Yeah.
So it's like, what are you going to do about it? So in that world where you're just another product in the production line, you're just there for the society, which we'll talk about later, right? Like
Yes.
where everyone's role in society is. You're just there for the society, right? You're not there for anything else. You're not there for yourself.
No, there's no longer an individual. And I think that when you take someone's access to history, to great thinkers and writers, like nowadays we're seeing all these books being banned, all these people being silenced, reporters not really able to report anymore. When you take the access to that, you are opening the door for things like this to happen, for people not to know their history, not to be able to be an individual.
Yeah. And the book goes to an extreme because they get rid of, so what year is it? It's 2020, it's 2020 years after Jesus, right?
Right.
That's our reality and that's our history, right? And then it's like, well, the book, they take it to another extreme. They get rid of all of that, and then their year starts as after Ford. So after the year that...
And Ford is Henry Ford, the inventor. Is that the right word?
Well, he designed the Model T.
Right, which is our first modern car.
Well, it wasn't the first, but it was the first readily available.
Right, that's what I mean. Like the first real, like you could just go and get a car.
Yeah, mass produced.
Yes.
And so
where it was available to pretty much everyone that had the means to pay for it. It wasn't just as before where you had to have a certain stature in society to be able to have a car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
this is their version of a higher being, a god, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is really creepy when they say thank Ford.
And they say for Ford's sake, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's like that's their model for how like how you said, the next level of human evolution, basically. Because that's really what it's about. It's about like, where are we going?
Right.
So,
and then it brings in all these religious questions. Is God replaceable? You know, is it just like a fill-in? Can you just put anyone in there and hope for the best? You know, and as we get further into the novel, Huxley does a really good job at answering that question, and he says no, you know, because we may not feel like we need God when we're purchasing these cars and living this extremely perfect societal life where everyone's happy. But when you go, you know, to quote one of the characters, when you go deep into the night and you're alone in the forest and you're so close to death, that's when you find the real God. And obviously that's up for debate and it has to do with your spirituality. But I think it's really interesting that after making this super perfect world, he finds a way to remind people like there's just something out there that we don't know, we don't understand, and we have to acknowledge it.
But then the contrast to that is that don't think about it. It doesn't
Right.
matter. It's interfering with your happiness.
Yes.
And at least their happiness is a superficial one. It's one of
It's one you can drink.
yes, it's one
It's
you can,
not real.
yeah.
Well, define what's real, right? Because they can literally hold it and drink it. They can drink their happiness.
Which a lot of people tend to do anyways, right?
Which, yeah, that's true. I mean, we were talking about alcohol a little bit ago. That could be happiness for a lot of people. But is it a real happiness, one that is sustainable?
No, it's that even in the book it's temporary. That's why they have to keep drinking
That's
it.
exactly.
And it's
And to go back to, sorry to interrupt you, to your point on Aristotle, Aristotle was referring to happiness as a sustainable thing that we could actually try to maintain within understanding that it's not a constant state, but like you said, a way of life. Yeah.
Jenny. I want to finish the book and I want to talk about this one again.
Yeah.
So-
I think this was awesome. Yeah, if you guys have any questions, comments, please leave them down below. This was super fun. I think we got to hit some really important themes and points, and we hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to Community Newspapers for having us, and we will see you next time.
Take care, everybody.